Thank you, Chairman, and thank you and to Senator Peters for holding the hearing. It's very important. It's timely. Obviously, all of us want to see our Postal Service work and work well. And let me just give a shout out to David Janis, who's our letter carrier, and to all the letter carriers and all the postal workers, because I do think, particularly during this pandemic, they're more appreciated than ever. And so the men and women who you lead, Mr. DeJoy, please pass along to them our thanks. I like having this hearing now because I think there's been a lot of misinformation out there, and I like getting to the facts. One of the facts I've learned this morning is that you started 67 days ago, and much of what we've been talking about in the media, at least, including the blue boxes and the sorting machines, that happened before you got there, and it was part of a plan. I knew the former Postmaster General. She came up through the ranks, was not a political person at all. And anyway, that's helpful to know that that's what's going on. It's also helpful to know that you were appointed by the Postal Board of Governors, and that's a bipartisan group. In fact, we confirmed those people, and it was a unanimous selection. And I guess it's based on your being a logistics expert. And just hearing you this morning, I can tell you got a passion for the logistics side of things. I also know that the long-term financial picture for the post office, postal service is not pretty. And by the way, that's been true for a long, long time. And that's not really something that a Postmaster General can do much about. It requires legislation. Senator Collins, Senator Feinstein have a bill as an example right now that provides for some reforms and some additional funding. Everybody knows it's in trouble. Everybody knows we've got to deal with this issue. And so, although I'm going to ask you some tough questions and others will, really a lot of this comes back onto Congress and not doing its job in terms of the longer term financial picture. But the immediate issue is to be sure that these elections work well. And I appreciate the fact that you said this morning that that's going to be your top priority between now and the election. Every one of us on this panel, I hope, want to be sure that we have the ability to have an election that is well run, where people have their votes counted, and many are going to be using the Postal Service. Let me start, Mr. DeJoy, by just asking you a general question. Do you support absentee voting, and do you support voting by mail generally?
I'm going to vote by mail. Yes. I voted by mail for a number of years. The Postal Service will deliver every ballot and process every ballot in time that it receives.
Well, I appreciate that. So you do support voting by mail?
I do. That's an interest. I think the American public should be able to vote by mail, and the Postal Service will support it. So I guess that's yes.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, the states are going to decide this, not the Congress or not the post office, and many states are going to do it. I mean, in Ohio, we've had absentee voting for a couple decades now. That's no fault, meaning that you don't have to give a reason, and it works quite well. I vote every year by absentee because I don't know where the heck I'm going to be in Washington or in Ohio based on our schedule. So it's worked well. And, we also are going to have in Ohio a lot of other ways for people to vote. We're going to be sure that it's easy to vote in Ohio, and it's hard to cheat in Ohio. And I think that's the important thing. There's been a lot of news coverage about the Postal Service sending letters to 46 states, including Ohio and DC, to let them know they can't guarantee all ballots cast by mail will arrive on time. Is this due to a lack of funding, which is what many are saying, or is it due to state laws on voting and the time it takes to turn around receiving and delivering the ballots?
Senator, this was not a change from anything that we have done in previous years. It was just more detail and more emphasis put on it, partly because of the expected rise in vote by mail, and also the pandemic. And what the team set out to do is make the election boards and then eventually the American public pretty simple, what our processes were. And therefore, to guarantee that if you follow these processes, there was no extra Herculean efforts on our part to get your ballot in, which therefore mitigated the risk of it potentially not getting there.
Yeah.
So mailing.
Well, I think that's important to note, that this is something that has been a problem for years, including previous elections. You sent out warnings in previous elections. And look, I think the post office has got to coordinate better with state election systems. I think state election systems has got to coordinate better with the post office.
Mhm.
I mean, in Ohio, as an example, the time frame between when you can cast your ballot and when it is postmarked, and you can get a ballot as late as Saturday before the election, and to get that to the post office and back to you, and then date stamp before Monday is very hard to do logistically. I think that's one of the things that your letter pointed out was to these state systems, be sure and leave adequate time. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir. First of all, it was not my letter. It was a letter from our general counsel. But yeah, pointing out all the different variations that we could experience and how fast we could process it. But yes, there are times we get the ballots. Ballots was sent out the day before the election. It's almost impossible for the voter to vote, for the ballot to get to the voter, for the voter to vote, and for it to get back in time for the election. So this was a very, very well thought out effort to safeguard the election, not to get in the way of safeguard the processing of ballots, not to get in the way of it.
What advice would you give voters? This is an opportunity for you to speak to the voters of Ohio and the country. Would you advise them to wait till the last minute, or would you advise them to leave at least a week?
The general word around here is vote early. Vote early.
I think that's really important to tell people because, again, under Ohio's law and a lot of other laws, the time frame is really close. If you request an absentee ballot, you got to be sure that it can be delivered in time. I am concerned about the delays that we have seen in Ohio and elsewhere. We have a number of veterans who've contacted us and said they weren't able to get their medication, and there's some just heartbreaking stories. One is a 70-year-old surgeon in Vietnam, has COPD, has trouble breathing. The inhaler refill was mailed through the Postal Service due to delays. He ran out of it while waiting for it to arrive. And then his insurance said, you know what? We're not going to pay for another refill to be filled because it's already been shipped through the Postal Service. And he can't afford to pay for another emergency refill personally. Let me ask you about that, particularly the veterans' medications that are shipped through the mail. Are you focused on that issue, and what can we do to correct that problem?
Senator, first of all, we are working here feverishly to get the system running at stability, and also to get hire more workers to handle the delivery process. And we're all feel bad about what the dip in our service level has been. We serve 161 million people. We still deliver at 99.5% of the time. We have significant efforts to continue to improve on that process, and everybody is working here feverishly to get that right.
Well, I hope you will, and let's ensure these medications are delivered in time, and be sure that when the production doesn't meet the transportation schedule, as you said earlier, that there are some efforts made to align those two, because it's a lifeline for people, all over the country, particularly in our rural areas. And I thank you for your service and for the answers you give today.